Hello and welcome to the discussion on multiplying radicals. For this you'll want to know the product rule for square roots. If a square root of A and square root of B are real numbers, that means the stuff inside are not negative of the radical, then the square root of A times the square root of B is the square root of A times B. If A is a positive number, then the square root of A times the square root of A just gives you A. So now to look at some examples, we have number 1 to simplify after multiplication has happened. So we can actually combine these together, since we have two real numbers, into the radical of 3 times 18. All we did was take the radical of 3 times the radical of 18, bring them together under one radical with the multiplication symbol inside. And what happens when you multiply 3 and 18? You get the product of 54. It is under the radical. And 54 can be thought of as the product of 9 and 6. And what we did was we just took 56 and tried to find stuff that was a perfect square inside of it. And the 9 can come out of the square root as a 3, leaving the 6 under the radical. With number 2, you can think of this in two ways. You can think of it in that the square root and the, that's only 100. That the square root and the square cancel each other, leaving you with just what's inside. Or you could go ahead and solve, saying that the square root of 100 being squared looks like the square root of 100 times the square root of 100. Bringing it together under one radical, we have 100 times 100. That's going to be the radical of 10,000. And what is the square root of 10,000? That is 100. Looking at number 3, we're actually going to use the distributive property. You bring her down. What we're going to do is take this radical 10 and multiply it by everything that is inside the parentheses. And you might want to be tempted to simplify what's inside, but you cannot because those are not common terms. So if we distribute, we have the radical 10 times radical 5 plus radical 10 times a negative radical 7. If we go through and simplify, we have the square root of 10 times the square root of 5 is just the square root of 10 times 5. We have positive times a negative, giving us a negative. If we were to put the 10 and the 7 under the same radical, it would look like this. It would be the radical of 10 times 7. Now let's go through and simplify on this first part. The radical of 10 times 5 will be the radical of 50 minus the radical of 10 times 7, or the radical of just 70. Now let's go through and break down, if we can, any where we can use a perfect square. If you look at 50, 50 can be thought of as the product of 25 and 2. And the 50 can come outside of the radical as a 5, leaving the 2 inside, minus the square root of 70. And that is your final answer. Okay, what you want to do with number 4 is take the derivative property, not the derivative, excuse me, the distributive property, and multiply each piece by everything found in the radical, in the parentheses. So if we do what's in green, we're going to have the square root of 3 times the square root of 3 plus the square root of 3 times the square root of 5. Okay, now let's distribute this negative radical 5. So we're going to have negative radical 5 times radical 3, and then negative radical 5 times the positive radical 5. Let's go through and simplify all of this now. So radical 3 times radical 3 will just leave you with our rule telling us it's going to be 3. Okay, now we can simplify this portion right here of radical 3 times 5 minus, and we simplify this piece right here, we're going to have, again, a negative radical 3 times 5. And then using our rule for this last piece, radical 5 times radical 5, that's just going to leave us with 5. If you look at this middle term right here, these will cancel out, giving you 0, or just leaving you with the answer 3 minus 5, leaving you with the answer just negative 2. Looking at this fifth example, we have the set radical 2 plus 4, and we're going to multiply it by the set radical x minus 4. So let's use that distributive property. And first, let's carry it across everything found inside the parentheses. This is the FOIL method also referred to. So if we do what's in red first, we're going to have radical x times radical x plus radical x times a negative 4. Now let's distribute the positive 4 to everything inside the second set of parentheses. We're going to have a positive 4 times radical 5 plus 4 times negative 4. Okay, if we were to bring these together, we'd have radical of x squared, or just leaving us with x. Over here, we're going to have a 4 times radical x. Over here with this piece, we're going to have a plus 4 radical x. And then finally, 4 times negative 4 will just give you negative 16. Simplifying this out even further, we'll see that these terms right here cancel out, leaving us just with x minus 16. Okay, with our final example, this portion, we have the radical x minus 2. Squaring means it's going to rewrite the term one more time. Now we're going to use that FOIL method to multiply it by everything inside the parentheses. So if we first do what's in black, we're going to have the square root of x times the square root of x plus the square root of x times negative 2. Now to do what's in blue, we're going to have a negative 2 times the square root of x and then minus 2 times a negative 2. Now to go through and simplify, square root of x times square root of x will just leave you with x. Now we're going to have a square root of x times negative 2, leaving you with negative 2 square root of x. We're going to do the same thing again because this is what this portion in blue simplifies to, the negative 2 times square root of x. And finally, the negative times a negative gives you a positive. 2 times 2 is 4. If you simplify this further, you'll see you'll have x minus this middle portion will turn to a negative 4 square root of x plus 4 as your final answer.